Touchdown pass from Tua Tagovailoa in the third quarter, helping the Dolphins snap a 3-game losing skid. It was just their second win in 8 games. The Miami defense kept the Rams out of the end zone. Joshua Carty kicked 5 field goals for the Rams, who dropped to 4-5. They failed to score a touchdown for just the 8th time in Coach Sean McVay's 8 seasons. Men's top 25 hoops on Monday. Number 2 Alabama beat McNeese 72-64. Number 7 Iowa State 82-56 over Kansas City. Number 13 Purdue beat Yale 92-84. Number 15 Marquette 70-62 over Central Michigan. Number 20 Florida beat Grambling 86-62. Number 21 Ohio State beat Youngstown State 81-47.
Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Oh no, my phone.
Hear that? It's the sound of a skater dropping her phone and smashing it on the ice. Yep, it's definitely broken. But at Verizon, we got you. This holiday, trade in any phone, any condition from one of our top brands and get a new Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus on Unlimited Ultimate and Watch 7 and Tab S9 FE 5G. That's over $1,800 in value. So you'll save big on 3 great gifts. Only at Verizon. Service plan required for watch and tablet. Over $1,800 value based on phone, watch, and tablet. Trade in and additional terms apply. See Verizon.com for details.
Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the propane tank on your grill first before hosting a tailgate.
Let's fire up.
Here, let me try. Seriously? You didn't check the propane?
Who wants chips?
Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds.
Salt and vinegar?
You're in good hands with Allstate.
Savings vary. Subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
No way football is played in the fall and winter
because the hits don't hurt as much when you're numb. Get the lowdown on all the sports action coming up right here.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on FFC, it is Football Full Circle, all a part of the SportsGrid Radio Network in Sirius XM. He is Scott Wetzel, I am Ben Stevens, back together on this Tuesday to recap the end of week number 10, the Monday Night Football finale out in Los Angeles, a critical game for both clubs entering between the Rams and the Dolphins as it pertains to keeping a season afloat and maybe, just maybe, a sliver of hope for an outside look at the postseason. And when 1 week in the NFL comes to a close, there is always news for a new week ahead and some changes to the coaching staff in Chicago. Not head coach Matt Eberflus, but the offensive play caller in Shane Waldron is now gone. So much to get to, Scott. Season-ending surgery confirmed for Dak Prescott as well. The news and the notes to get you set for Week 11 and beyond as the first week of the second half of this NFL season is now in the books.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's only a matter of time, right, for Eberflus, you would think. All right, we touched on this a little bit yesterday. I mean, they're bringing in a guy who was responsible for the passing game, and the offensive coordinator got fired. Why? Because the passing game sucks. I don't know how that quite equals out in Chicago, but it does. And it's amazing, Ben, what a win will do. And I speak as a Dolphin fan, right? 2-6 after last week's loss. The season's over. They're done. What's the point? Blah, 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 right? Now they get a win. It doesn't really improve things that much, right? At 3-6, but the optimism completely changes. Now you look at their schedule. They got the Raiders next week at home. They got the Patriots after that at home. Now all of a sudden, 2-6 can quickly turn to 5-6, and you're right back in the ballgame in the AFC.
Absolutely so, Scott. In the back half of the AFC, not nearly as strong as we anticipated entering this season. So let's go to Monday Night Football to end out week number 10. The Rams, winners of 3 straight. The Dolphins had dropped 3 in a row, even looking so much better in Tua Tagovailoa's return. 2 games entering last night on a Monday in LA. The Rams were a 2.5-point home favorite. Total was 48.5. And Scott, the Dolphins' defense, really the reason Miami was able to hold on for a much-needed win, snapping that 3-game skid and just the 3rd win of the year for Miami, as you alluded to, 23-15, beating the Rams and winning outright as a 2.5-point underdog in Los Angeles. That total of 48.5 does stay under. The Dolphins' defense bent a little bit. The Rams outgained Miami last night, but no offensive touchdowns for Los Angeles, just a bunch of field goals. It was their undoing. The Dolphins win outright as the 2.5-point underdog.
Yeah, it really was almost a carbon copy, Ben, of Sunday night's game, right? So many opportunities for the Houston Texans to blow that thing open with Detroit. And we talked about it yesterday. I gave credit to the Detroit defense for keeping that team in it, hoping eventually the offense would turn around. And obviously it did. And same thing last night. So many opportunities for the Rams to score touchdowns. And they end up with 5 field goals. It's just amazing how they had opportunity after opportunity. And as a Dolphin fan, I've not seen this Dolphin defense this year, but they came up big. Sacks last night. They had 1 sack their last 3 games. They got that in the first quarter alone last night. So good job by the Dolphin defense. I'm surprised really more so about the Rams offense. Everyone was healthy, but they just couldn't punch it in.
For sure, Scott. 4 sacks last night out of that Dolphins front. Chop Robinson getting involved. Miami's defense looked the best it has under first-year DC Anthony Weaver by far. Scott, it's always funny looking at the box score or maybe the play-by-play chart of how a game plays out. Of course, if you're not watching it, you don't get the full flow, but you can try to explain a few things just by the numbers, the stats, and the chart that you see. It's also fun to just make blanket statements about said chart and say, if I told you this, what would you expect the final outcome to be? If I told you that the Rams scored on 5 of their final 6 offensive possessions in the game, you probably would have said they scored 49 points, they beat the Dolphins by 30, and they have won 4 straight games. They did score on 5 of their final 6 possessions. They just were all field goals, and on that 6th possession, they missed a field goal from deep after a costly false start penalty. The Rams shot themselves in the foot all night long, Scott, and were unable to take advantage, even driving deep into Dolphins territory. Again, a score on 5 of their final 6 offensive drives, but only 3 points, just field goals.
Yeah, and like Sunday night, the game stays under. That game had no business, Ben, being an under. I mean, just no. You punch in just 1, 2 of those opportunities for the Rams to score touchdowns, and the game goes over, and it creates more of an offensive system. But yeah, 5 scores, all field goals, and somehow another game goes under. It's crazy how betting can be sometimes. And even Tua, played well at times, but Dolphins, kind of like Houston, had an opportunity really to blow this thing way, way open, and even they were kind of giving it back to the LA Rams.
It was crazy, Scott. Miami's first offensive possession, the very first of the game, as they received that opening kick, it looked like the Miami offensive juggernaut we had seen last year. Like, oh boy, here they are. 5 plays, 70 yards, less than 3 minutes of game clock elapsed. And then after that, really slowed down. Both teams had multiple turnovers, a lot of sloppy play at the end of the opening half as well. But when all is said and done, Miami comes through with a must-win game. And one, Scott, as we discussed yesterday, the Dolphins with Mike McDaniel, booked as the underdog, often let slip away just 3 outright wins in the 18 previous games for Miami as an underdog with Mike McDaniel. To a certain extent, that makes sense, right? You're the underdog. Even if it's just a few points on the spread, you're not expected to win the game outright. But you have to take advantage of a few of those opportunities throughout your life in the National Football League. Just the 4th outright win and now 19 games as the dog for the Dolphins with Mike McDaniel in a crucial one. Still a very large hill to climb. 3 games below 500 at 3-6, but a monumental win last night for Miami.
Yeah, and you survived the scare as a Dolphin fan as you watch Tua try and make a tackle after an interception head first. It's like, what are you doing, Tua? Come on, right? I mean, who can? Let him score a touchdown, right? I mean, you one more concussion and you're basically done. What are you doing over there? And so that tells me, listen, they won the game and he played well enough and this and that, what have you. But, the concept of going to Tua and saying, all right, we're going to let you play, but you got to play smart. You can't put your head down and try and make tackles. You can't put your head down and try and barrel someone over on a scramble. That clearly, Ben, has not gotten through to Tua because while I admire his veracity to go and try and make a tackle, you got to step back and be smart about this thing.
It was crazy, Scott, because if there was any quarterback you would not blame for showing no effort and trying to chase down a guy on an interception return after making a bad play, it would be Tua Tagovailoa. So even to get in the fray, fine. Try to push him out of bounds, Tua. You were on the sideline. Don't drop your helmet like a 4th grader playing Pee Wee football for the first time. He took a leg to the head. Thankfully, Nothing happened, and he was fine, stayed in the game. A couple of questionable decisions for Tua throwing the ball last night, but Tyreek Hill back into the end zone for the first time since the season opener. One of the few drives from either team that after the first quarter resulted in 6. Miami's got still plus 280 to make the postseason. Again, they're 3-6. It's going to be very difficult for the Dolphins to even sniff a playoff berth. But here we are at the end of 10 weeks, and in the 16-team conference that is the AFC, only 6 teams are above 500. We thought the AFC was going to be a gauntlet. It is anything but, because of teams like the Dolphins and the Jets and the Bengals and perhaps the Jaguars that we expected to win 9, 10, 11 games just to even have a chance at a wild card berth. None of those teams are really doing that. Only 6 teams above 500 at the end of 10 weeks. There is still a little bit of life for Miami to maybe flirt with the postseason.
Oh, it really is. And you consider that Denver is the 5-5 team that's going to make the playoffs at this point. They're in the 7th spot. You know, people really don't believe in Denver. It's not like a really good team that's maybe struggling. San Francisco, for example, right? So you have a team that you're chasing that you think is going to come back to the pack. And again, I'm a Dolphin fan, but you look at their schedule, it's not bad. We mentioned the next 2 weeks. They got the Jets still on the schedule. They're going to have to win at least one game, Ben, where they're not supposed to, whether it's Houston, Green Bay. Yeah. And if they can get in.
Been difficult for the Dolphins with Mike McDaniel, not last night, winning outright as a dog. The NFC West picture for the LA Rams after squandering a good opportunity last night at home to end out Week 10. Next on Football Full Circle.
Don't look like an idiot at work. Know your stuff. Football and everything else.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
The U.S. and Mexico agreed to amend a 1944 water treaty, which might bring some relief to South Texas farmers struggling with scarce water.
With the SportsGrid News Flash, I'm Trey Westerberg.
The International Water and Boundary Commission, a federal agency that oversees international water treaties between the U.S. and Mexico, announced Saturday that the two countries had signed a highly anticipated agreement that will give Mexico more options to meet its water deliveries to the U.S. South Texas farmers and ranchers have been devastated lately by low rainfall and Mexico falling behind on its deliveries to the region. California Governor Gavin Newsom plans to meet with the Biden administration this week to discuss zero-emission vehicles and disaster relief. The Democratic governor left for Washington Monday and will return home Wednesday. Newsom will also meet with California's congressional delegation. He is seeking federal approval for state climate rules, a $5.2 billion reimbursement for emergency funding during the COVID-19 pandemic, and updates to the state's Medicaid program, along with other priorities.
I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Every day, Cintas service reps help businesses get ready for the workday. They provide freshly laundered workwear delivered every week. Mats, mops, restroom and cleaning supplies. First aid and safety products to help your employees stay safe. They even test and inspect fire extinguishers and emergency lights. Cintas helps keep your business running smoothly. See what Cintas can do for you. Visit Cintas.com.
Oh, I'm ready!
And get ready for the workday.
You ever try fixing your car and realize you're missing that one part? Yeah, been there. That's why eBay's my go-to. They've got millions of parts, guaranteed to fit. I'm talking brake pads for when yours have seen one too many miles of stop and go. Oil filters, because you don't mess around with your engine care. Even got this cold air intake on my watch list. I might just go for it. To keep the ride cool and your DIY streak hot. Find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. eBay. Things people love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Fall is almost here.
It's time to stow the lawnmower and get ready for all that glorious action coming your way. Stay tuned to SportsGrid for all the strategies, angles, and info you need to get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Week number 10 of the NFL season has now come to a close, and the Rams at home as a slight favorite, expected to win outright against the Dolphins for their 4th consecutive win. That did not happen. And Scott, it's a costly loss for the Rams at home, not only as the favorites, but now they fall a game below 500. They had won 3 consecutive to resurrect their season, to get back to an even 500, 4-4 in an NFC West that features the San Francisco 49ers, but the Niners have certainly not run away with. In fact, they're not even in that top spot at the end of 10 weeks. So the Rams still have some life in the division, but being below 500, Scott, is costly, not just for the NFC West, because as we compare last night's results for the two teams in an interconference matchup, the back half of the AFC in that wild card chase, not all that difficult, not many successful teams at this moment. The NFC is a very, very different story. You will need a winning record at bare minimum to even contend for a wild card spot in the NFC. And Scott, more than likely, it will mean double-digit wins. The Rams falling to 4-5 with only 8 games remaining. That hill is also very difficult to climb.
Yeah. Well, you look at the schedule, right? We all play the game. Okay, win, who knows, win, loss, right? I mean, you have to pencil 2-6 Miami coming into your building as a win. I mean, I'm not surprised Miami won as much as I am surprised LA lost, if that makes any sense. Listen, Miami's got players, right? Potentially that they should not be a 2-6 team when everyone's healthy. So I'm not surprised they won. But it's the Rams' performance yesterday, Ben. I mean, we mentioned it, 5 drives there, 6 really drives that, and great opportunities to score a touchdown. They can't score. They couldn't run the ball, sacked 4 times, pressured numerous other times. I mean, it just didn't look like anything we've seen out of this Rams team the last 3 weeks. And you had Pookie, you had Cooper Kupp. I mean, everything was there. Kyron Williams, for everything to have a great game last night. And just from the outset, you mentioned first drive for the Dolphins right down the field. I mean, just a weird performance out of the Rams, and they don't have the luxury of throwing one of those out there. You mentioned they're behind the 8 ball here. They got to overcome San Francisco. They got to overcome the Arizona Cardinals. Even if you don't think the Cardinals are going to win the division, they're certainly going to contend for a wild card at this point. And then you have all the other teams with Green Bay. So really, that was just a bad loss. And you look at their schedule, it's not easy, not overly difficult, but you do have a couple of monsters. San Fran is on there. So it's not going to be easy from here on out for the Rams. That was a loss that they could not afford.
Yeah, I completely agree, Scott. Again, it is not the damning loss that ends their season, but when you start 1-4 and injuries offensively being a key component why, when you get healthier, you have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp play a full game together for maybe the first time since week 2 of last season, and you get back a lot of the key pieces on your offensive line, but perhaps because they had barely played together all year, they looked bad last night. Stafford sacked 4 times. He's not exactly the most mobile anymore in year number 16 at the age of 36, but even outside of the sack, Scott, under pressure countless times last night. But even in that, Scott, he threw for 293 on 46 attempts, but still 293 yards, and both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua had at least 80 receiving yards last night. They just could not convert. And it wasn't really, Scott, maybe a few times there in the second half that you can kind of scratch your head and say, Sean McVay, that is, why aren't you going for a touchdown? The 3 is really not going to benefit you down by multiple scores, double digits at this time, as much as the 6 obviously would. There wasn't all that many questionable decisions, Scott. It just, the Rams kept putting themselves behind the 8 ball, and now their season in that essence as well. 8 teams above 500 at the end of 10 weeks in the NFC, and the team that would currently be on the outside looking in of that 3rd and final wild card spot, Scott, is the short preseason favorite that is the San Francisco 49ers at 5-4.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like last night with the Rams, back to that for a second. The 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5s, where you're thinking, all right, we got 2 plays to get a first down here because we're not going to kick a field goal. They end up getting sacks or lost 2 or 3 yards on a running play. So now all of a sudden it turned into 4th and 8 and 4th and 9 or longer. It's like, all right, the decision is made. And it kept on staying on that 11-point difference. So the field goal, theoretically, we need a field goal. It does cut it to a 1-score game. So as you say, there wasn't really a whole lot of controversy. I would have tried one more time to score the touchdown instead of kicking that last field goal with like 38 seconds left. But I get it. You want to have time, to throw the Hail Mary and everything else. But it just wasn't there for the Rams. So, I mean, it
wasn't.
At this point, man, I was buying into the Rams. Who couldn't help but buy in, right? After 3 straight wins, and they're getting their guys healthy. But, man, that was just an ugly loss. I don't know. It's going to be so hard for them.
Yeah, it really is. It's got the second to last offensive possession for LA. They had 3rd and goal to go from the 4. They didn't get it, and they elected to kick the field goal. That might have been the only time if I was Sean McVay, I would have said, let's just go get this touchdown. If not, we're still down by 2 touchdowns and 2 scores. We can try to figure things out from there. But it was really the sign of the times for the Rams. You're right, Scott. 3 of 12 on third down tries last night. And often not, hey, 3rd and 3, we just missed an incompletion off the fingertips barely. 3rd and 3 became 3rd and 13 or 4th and 13 after a costly sack or a costly penalty at the most inconvenient time. Here's the interesting thing, Scott, from the odds perspective on the LA Rams. Again, a game below 500 now, and their playoff price is plus 470. I almost think, Scott, it could be worth, if you believe the Rams will win out or win a ton of their final 8 games to have a chance to get to double digits. You almost look at the NFC West price at the plus 900 number because they have the win right now over San Francisco and Seattle. They did lose to Arizona, but they're 2-1 in division with the other games against their 3 divisional foes down the home stretch. They're going to need to win those anyway to have a shot at being a wild card team. That 9-1 price is a little bit intriguing. All to say, Scott, the long plus money prices feel pretty fair for LA's outlook of being a true playoff team.
Yeah, but that's not bad thinking. You're right. If you're going to win the games in order to become playoff eligible wild card wise, it's probably going to be those games. So you might as well take the bigger price, and hope Arizona comes back to the pack. Like I think most people think they will, and maybe and San Fran doesn't go off on this great run, which is always possible.
We'll talk about the NFC, Scott, because a couple of teams we expected to at least be in the postseason or maybe a playoff contender. It's been a disastrous 2024 season, and the news even worse today in both Dallas and in Chicago, I guess. Maybe it's a sigh of relief that Shane Waldron is gone. We'll talk about it up next here on Football Full Circle.
There's smart.
And there's not smart.
Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Keep it here.
And win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
Yeah, we were crooked.
1920, baseball names Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis as the first commissioner. His first order of business was cleaning up the game after the Black Sox scandal. 8 members of the White Sox, including shoeless Joe Jackson, were forever banned from the game.
Say it ain't so, Joe. Say it ain't so.
For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
In case you've been worried about AI taking your job and destroying the world economy, perhaps fear not. A large, well-known fast food chain is quietly dropping its AI-powered drive-through automated order-taking system after some mishaps.
Would you like extra sauce with your 2,100 orders of chicken nuggets?
Believe it or not, these are actual scenarios.
I'm sure you asked for 40 dozen pounds of butter.
The fatal flaw? Voice recognition AI that can't identify misidentified spoken orders.
I just want you to know that I have complete confidence in the long-term success of this mission. By the way, here is your 4-gallon van of bacon cob caramel ice cream.
Yahoo! Follow me at Chicapalbo on X and stay tuned to The Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Sports Rage tonight.
He's going to get a crack at this, Cam. He'll get one. They're not going to get it to him 2 times in a row. This is like perfect area where like they're going to want to go to Chase in the back of the end zone here in a little fade pattern. So here we go. Like they should be able to.
Nope, they're throwing.
Nope. Oh, that was to Jamar Chase, too. Son of a bitch. They wanted to go to him.
It's Sports Rage Tonight with Gabe Morency. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific. On the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go,
there you are.
Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you.
So now you can get the winning edge
anywhere. Even while the wife's talking to you.
If you've got an earbud.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC, Monday Night Football finale of week number 10. That week done, so you immediately look forward to week number 11 and the remainder of this regular season around the National Football League. Scott, big news today in a couple of spots. We'll start with the coaching staff change first in Chicago. Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator for the Bears in his first year after being the Seahawks OC the past few seasons, has already been fired at the conclusion of 10 weeks. Bears fans have been clamoring for this for quite some time. In my opinion, it's a few weeks too late. But Scott, as you shared yesterday, 23 consecutive offensive possessions for Chicago without a touchdown. No duh. The guy that is in charge of calling those plays got fired. Some thought it might be Matt Eberflus with him. It might be down the line, but the first coaching move is made in the Windy City. The Bears have fired offensive coordinator Shane Waldron.
Yeah, this after they fired Luke Getsy from last year. So this was his first year with the team. Now, obviously, Caleb Williams wasn't with the club last year, but now this is 3 offensive coordinators. It'll be 2 for Caleb. And what if they do fire everyone at the end of the year, like is a strong possibility? Now we're going to work it on a third, offensive coordinator for Caleb Williams and a 4th one for the Bears, in the last year. So listen, as I kind of joked there, but it's true. You're firing the offensive coordinator. Why? Because the passing game stinks, right? No one's mentioned that the running game isn't any good. So what are you going to do? You're going to promote the passing game coordinator. How does that make any sense? The reason the offensive coordinator got fired is because the passing game stinks. So you would think the passing game coordinator would have a little bit of a say in that. Why not fire him as well? It's desperation. I know you don't want to bring in a whole new guy in here from outside the organization. So I get it. This is what they do, Ben. But you did say yesterday, and it's 100% true. It's a sign of desperation. That's all. Do we really think Waldron was the reason they're not winning and not playing well? No, I don't think so. There's so many different guys that have their hands on this thing, but you have to appease the public. You got to show the Bears fan, all right, we're not giving up on the season, and we need to do something, even if it's fire the offensive coordinator.
Scott, when you make coordinator changes or you dismiss people from your coaching staff, it is the last-ditch effort of a head coach, maybe even a front office, to try to save face and hold on to influence. Scott, to your point about Luke Getsy being fired last year, who was also fired from the Raiders earlier this season as well, maybe shows you the talent evaluators for this Chicago front office, not all that great. But Shane Waldron is the 8th member of Matt Eberflus's coaching staff to be fired or resigned, or resign in the past 14 months. That's just not consistent football. And Scott, we talked about this yesterday. It's not so much when or where in the draft order you are selected in front of somebody or behind somebody. In fact, it is the scenario and the situation you find yourself in. You can make sense of why Jaden Daniels is having immediate and historic success in Washington, because Dan Quinn is a proven NFL winning head coach. And Cliff Kingsbury might not be the greatest head coach, but as an offensive play caller, he's pretty darn good. Thus, Jaden Daniels, success. Caleb Williams is now going to be in a tumultuous situation where not only, Scott, will he see a second play caller in the first 11 games of his career, more than likely when the season is done, he is going to see a second head coaching staff and perhaps second front office in his 2 years in the NFL. And that's where you start the tailspin for a young and promising generational type talent that just never finds his footing in the NFL. And of all the organizations that have had issue developing young quarterback talent, the Bears are that to the nth degree. It is not the firing of Shane Waldron, I think, is the correct move, but it's not like an overwhelming sense of relief that, okay, now we've got things figured out.
Yeah. And the other thing, Ben, is if you would have told the Bears before the season began, you'd be 4-5 after the first 9 weeks. They might be a little disappointed, but it's not the end of the world, right? Not everyone can be, C.J. Stroud like last year. But then now you have the Jaden Daniels situation, just like Stroud, throw it in the Bear fans' face. And, how come Washington could be this good? Why aren't we this good? We were 4-2. So over 3 weeks, all of a sudden, Waldron turned into an idiot. So it's amazing. We see it all the time, how it is. What have you done for me lately? Boy, you've got to win and win right from the start, because otherwise 4-5 overall, I don't think is really that bad.
And the Bears did have some expectation, right? Because of how talented the roster was around the quarterback, the offensive investment in the offseason. The win total was 8.5. The over was juiced at -150 to even get to 9 wins now seems like a very, very long shot. More around the NFL next on FFC.
The winning edge.
You've got it.
But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us.
But we're working on that.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. Shop Chuck Sanders. 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel addressed the incident that occurred in Sunday's win over Tampa. They get into an altercation with kicker Jake Moody after the kicker missed 3 field goals. Long snapper Tabor Pepper was also involved. Niners head coach Kyle Shanahan said Pepper overreacted to what happened, while Samuel said he was simply frustrated.
Normally I don't even get like that, but just like frustrated in the heat of battle. A really close game, and I kind of got out of character a little bit, but I'll talk to Moody and we'll get past it.
The Lions rallied for a big win on Sunday with 19 unanswered points at Houston, but a major concern is quarterback Jared Goff tossed 5 interceptions. Lions coach Dan Campbell.
I don't feel like this is, oh man, what are you doing? These weren't ill-advised throws. It wasn't her day.
Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Shop early, save big, all month long during Black Friday build-up at Lowe's. Right now, get select pre-lit artificial Christmas trees starting at just $59.98. Don't wait to save. Shop these deals today, in-store or online, because Lowe's knows deals. Discount taken at time of purchase while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
After you use Bounce Dryer sheets and realize how fresh, soft, less wrinkled, and less staticky your laundry can be, you'll put a sheet on your every time. Like those socks that smell like they've been through a marathon. Put a sheet on it. Or that blanket that's got wrinkles on its wrinkles. Put a sheet on it. Maybe even your chatty coworker who keeps distracting you. Okay, Bounce Dryer sheets can't do it all. But for fresher, softer, better laundry, put a sheet on it with Bounce.
Days are getting cooler.
The shadows are getting longer. You know what that means.
It's football weather. So bundle up and keep it here for all the latest strategies and gridiron information.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Scott, final point on the change in offensive coaching staff in Chicago. Shane Waldron dismissed. Thomas Brown, who you mentioned, the passing game coordinator, has been elevated to the offensive play caller. He started last year as a young, promising offensive coordinator under Frank Reich in Carolina, was relieved of those duties about a month into the season. Reich started calling plays again for the Panthers, was fired after a 1-10 start in 11 games, all back to the idea that your situation for Bryce Young and now Caleb Williams as the number 1 overall picks can often turn sour very, very quickly. We'll see if Thomas Brown figures it out. Scott, I still think the writing is on the wall for the guy that I like to call now Matt Eberflus. I don't think he's going to survive this year and be back in 2025. And if things really get, and they've gone south very quickly, 3 consecutive losses, the Bears look like they have quit on their organization, on their coaching staff. There seems to be some turmoil in the locker room in terms of player buy-in, where things are right now. And things could really kind of have an exclamation point, but not in a positive way, as the Bears are a 6.5-point home dog this week at Soldier Field against the hated and bitter rivals that are the Green Bay Packers. If the Packers come into Soldier Field and win that game comfortably, as the odds would indicate, it's only going to be another week of turmoil and tough times for Chicago.
Yeah, and they've lost, I think it was 10 in a row. They've lost 9-1 against the spread, I believe it is as well. Something crazy numbers like that for Green Bay. Yeah, listen, Eberflus, between him and the Saints, those were the 2 teams I really was surprised they brought their head coaches back. It was almost like, dead man walking. What are you going to do? Is his 6-5, or, is a 1 game over 500 record going to keep Eberflus around? Maybe, maybe not. He was set up to fail. They really should have just fired him before the season began and start new this season. So now the whole world's supposed to change because you changed the offensive coordinator and you're facing a team you haven't beaten in a decade. So, good luck, Chicago Bears, as the 4th. Well, is it, Ben, the question you ask yourself if you're a Bears fan is, had that Hail Mary not been completed,
Oh,
would they still have lost the next two? Would they still have not scored a touchdown in either one of those two games? I mean, can a play like that just completely deflate a club? Maybe, but you were still 4-3 at the time, and you were heading out to Arizona, winnable game against the Cardinals. But if that's the case, then that's where your head coach fails. It's up to him to get the guys motivated, right?
Scott, I remember talking to one of my best friends who is from Chicago, is a diehard Bears fan, is not having a fun football season by any means. At the end of that game, and one of our other friends in this group chat was like, hey, everything will be okay at the end of this, right? Like, good job by the Bears coming back and finding a way to win an ugly game. And I was like, listen, I'm not saying anything until the game's over, but I've got some thoughts. And then sure enough, the Hail Mary happens, and it's like, well, now whatever I was going to say. But my point was going to be Shane Waldron should have been fired anyway for how awful he was in terms of his play calling on the goal line at the end of the game, handing the ball off in I formation to a backup. Again, Shane Waldron deserves the firing that he received. Again, peculiar times for Chicago now moving forward. Scott, the other news that was confirmed today, which is what we anticipated, Dak Prescott is going to undergo officially season-ending surgery on his severely injured hamstring. Jerry Jones telling 105.3 The Fan in Dallas on the radio show today that Dak will undergo surgery in New York tomorrow to repair the avulsion of his hamstring, which means the muscle, the tendon, comes off the bone, speaking to the significance of that injury. Scott, it was all but confirmed this weekend that Dak was going to miss the remainder of this year. They put out the idea he was seeking a second opinion in New York City. I guess that second opinion confirmed surgery to end the year would be needed. And here are the Dallas Cowboys at 3-6 after 10 weeks of this NFL season. Also in a tailspin, also more than likely going to have a new head coach and coaching staff entering next season.
Yeah, and again, probably the answer is yes, but it makes you wonder, had Dallas not re-signed Dak Prescott to a ridiculous, in my eyes, 4 years, $260 million deal, would they do it now, knowing this injury? Now, it's not a career-ending injury by any stretch, but it's still an injury, and, it gives you an opportunity to bottom out, get a top 5 draft choice, no doubt, get a quarterback, and just move on if you wanted to from Dak. Whereas now they're locked into this guy. There's no way, listen, I'm not a doctor, man, but I never thought for a second he was going to play again this year if the reports were true that the muscle's pulling away from the bone. I mean, come on, right? Seriously? You're going to be playing in a couple of weeks? They were talking about, questioning whether they were going to put him on IR or not. It's like the muscle's off the bone? What am I missing here? So, they might not win again. They got 2 games on the schedule that on paper you think, okay, they got the Giants and they got Carolina. But all the other games, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Washington a couple of times, I mean, you really are looking at a 4, 5, 6 win at best, Cowboys team.
No doubt. And Scott, the projected odds haven't really caught up for the remainder of this year. Of course, week to week, as Cooper Rush, as we learned yesterday, will remain the starting quarterback. Yippee. The week-to-week odds, at least as of right now for the Cowboys, they're a 7.5-point home underdog at the Star on Monday night in the Lone Star Showdown against the Houston Texans. And the Cowboys are going to be more than likely an underdog in basically every game to end the year, give or change, maybe a contest or two, but mostly an underdog. With Mike McCarthy as the head coach since 2020, Dallas is just 12-16 against the spread as an underdog. One of the worst underdog covering teams in the NFL in the last 4.5 years. It's not going to be good for Dallas, and not that we assumed it to be. Micah Parsons, Scott, I don't want to say was critical of Mike McCarthy at the end of Sunday's game, but was asked about the situation and basically said what happens with Mike McCarthy is above his pay grade. He'll get a new head coaching job, or he'll get a new coaching job wherever he goes. Micah wanted to win a Super Bowl, a championship for the guys, the veterans on his team. And thus, Mike McCarthy at his Monday press conference said that he and Micah had a conversation about that, because anytime you leak some tea outside of the facility, you address it internally. And Micah Parsons on his podcast, which is fine when things are good, not so great when things are bad, explained he never intended to throw Mike McCarthy under the bus, although he kind of threw Mike McCarthy under the bus.
Yeah, if you watched it, and I did, Ben, the whole interview was right after the game in front of his locker. It went about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't an anti-McCarthy thing versus a pro, I feel bad for the veteran players thing. But you have to be careful. Everything was kind of good. When he meant with McCarthy moving on, we see it. We're talking about all these coaches are all getting new jobs. So he was just basically saying in the beginning, yeah, McCarthy's probably going to get another job. If that's the case, then so be it. I feel bad for the veteran players who, don't have that much time left in their careers. But so that was all kind of good. But then he threw in the Zach Martin's, practice and work harder than any day Mike McCarthy ever did. That was the shot of like, okay, that really wasn't necessary. Yes, you were trying to attack him, but it does show a lack of respect that a player has for his head coach. There's no two ways. He can't deny that.
And Scott, Jerry Jones has said he does not intend on making any mid-season, in-season coaching changes. That's not overly shocking, although I do believe Mike McCarthy could be fired. What are you firing him for? Your $60 million quarterback is now out for the remainder of this year. He's a lame duck head coach. His contract was not renewed entering this season. It's the final year of his deal. You basically have a permanent head coach who is acting as an interim head coach, the inverse of what we see in many other spots. There will be a change at the end of this year, no doubt. And because of it, the Cowboys are probably going to have a good draft position, and they'll need some help. And then Jerry Jones is going to have to foot the bill again to pay Michael Parsons this offseason. The one thing we always say, though, Scott, Dallas normally is a great regular season team. Last 3 years, they have won 12 games every regular season. It's by the time they get to the playoffs, you have your questions. I would not use my worst enemy's money to bet on the Cowboys to win the NFC Championship or a Super Bowl bet before the year. But the Cowboys aren't even going to have an opportunity to be disappointing in the postseason with how bad this regular season has been. We'll have more news around the National Football League up next, live right here on Football Full Circle on SportsGrid Radio.
Yeah, it's getting cooler.
Football weather is here.
Stay tuned for all the latest odds, strategies, and info. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
The U.S. and Mexico agreed to amend a 1944 water treaty, which might bring some relief to South Texas farmers struggling with scarce water.
With the SportsGrid News Flash, I'm Trey Westerberg.
The International Water and Boundary Commission, a federal agency that oversees international water treaties between the U.S. and Mexico, announced Saturday that the two countries had signed a highly anticipated agreement that will give Mexico more options to meet its water deliveries to the U.S. South Texas farmers and ranchers have been devastated lately by low rainfall and Mexico falling behind on its deliveries to the region. California Governor Gavin Newsom plans to meet with the Biden administration this week to discuss zero-emission vehicles and disaster relief. The Democratic governor left for Washington Monday and will return home Wednesday. Newsom will also meet with California's congressional delegation. He is seeking federal approval for state climate rules, a $5.2 billion reimbursement for emergency funding during the COVID-19 pandemic, and updates to the state's Medicaid program, along with other priorities.
I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Lowe's honors our military community this Veterans Day and every day. To say thank you, verified military members, veterans, and their spouses get 10% off everyday purchases, plus free silver key status with My Lowe's Rewards. It's our way of showing our gratitude to the brave people who have and continue to serve our country. Learn more now at Lowe's.com/military. 10% discount can't be combined with another offer. Exclusions, terms, and conditions apply. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at Lowe's.com/terms. Subject to change.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds, which could be life-changing. I mean, you could put that money towards that zero-turn lawnmower you've always wanted. And after using its edge-shaping technology to meticulously sculpt the face of the Mona Lisa into your grass, you'll become the undisputed king of Saturday morning lawn care, leaving your neighbor and sworn enemy Gary to question his place in the delicate neighborhood ecosystem. And it's all because you could save money switching at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important.
That's where we come in.
SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning
more often.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. More news and notes around the National Football League as Week 11 is on the horizon. Scott, what a great Week 11 slate we have all weekend long, starting on Thursday in the battle for the number one spot in the NFC East. Short week in Philadelphia between the Eagles and the Commanders. A game of the year potential in Western New York on Sunday between the Bills and the Chiefs. We've got the Steelers and the Ravens. So many impactful games on this Sunday slate. And Scott, as we look around the AFC, as we mentioned at the end of the Dolphins' win last night in Los Angeles, there's some teams that are below 500 right now in the AFC that do have a shot of earning a playoff spot because only 6 teams around the conference have a winning record. And there still is a belief in Indianapolis. That is the Colts. Shane Steichen telling reporters yesterday, Joe Flacco remains the starter for Indianapolis despite taking over for Anthony Richardson when AR was healthy in 2 consecutive weeks, and then coming up on the losing end big time in both, not even covering as at least a 4.5-point underdog in either contest. So Joe Flacco remains the starter. Scott, the quarterback matchup we have between 2 disappointing teams as of late on Sunday in MetLife is the 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers of the 3-7 New York Jets and the nearly 40-year-old Joe Flacco, who is currently 39, turns 40 in January, of the 4-6 Indianapolis Colts. The Jets a 3.5-point home favorite on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised about the Flacco announcement. He really hasn't played well these last 2 weeks, and I love Joe Flacco. Love what he did, last year with the Browns and first couple of games with the Indianapolis Colts. But he couldn't score 2 weeks ago. Didn't even get into the red zone last week, except for an by the way touchdown in the final seconds. Otherwise, They really got crushed by Buffalo. So what are you trying to prove here? I mean, at this point, you got to make a run, okay, and who maybe even make the playoffs, right? But, are the Indianapolis Colts going to win the Super Bowl, though? No, they're not, right? More than likely going to be a wild card team. So what are you proving by, winning, and getting knocked out even in the first round of the postseason? Unless you're telling me that Anthony Richardson, you've decided is not your guy. And if that's the case, then you go draft yourself another quarterback. So I don't know if you go into next year with Flacco as your starter, right? If that's the case, then that's the case. But I'm a little surprised at that one, Ben.
Yeah, me as well, Scott. And that's been the unfortunate reality of the Anthony Richardson situation. AR was a development piece. AR was somebody that needed to grow and learn in the National Football League, not only because his numbers in his only full season at Florida were not great. It's also because he only had 1 full season at Florida. I don't know if he was a project necessarily, but they had to really kind of sharpen things up around the edges to make him an everyday successful starting quarterback in the NFL. And all of these lumps in growing pains should have happened last year. But of course, Anthony Richardson only played in 4 games before shoulder surgery to end his rookie campaign abruptly. And then Shane Steichen showed he's a good coach, good offensive mind, had Gardner Minshew, led them to a winning record and a near AFC South divisional crown. And Colts fans in the organization and a rather talented roster outside of the quarterback spot said to themselves, we've got the recipe to be a playoff team. Anthony Richardson so greatly struggled this year, not advocating for him as a successful quarterback at this moment who is the rightful answer to lead Indianapolis to the postseason. But Scott, when you look at Joe Flacco, right, these are the 2 games that he has started when AR has been healthy. It's been a coaching decision to sit Anthony Richardson on the bench. But in the 4 games he has started overall this year, just 1-3. And maybe the most damning thing the past 2 weeks is the fact the Colts, prior to Joe Flacco starting, were 5-0 against the number as an underdog. They haven't really come close to covering a spread these last 2 weeks. 5.5-point dog in Minneapolis. They got nothing, less than $180 through the air for Flacco and an interception. And you're right, last week it was a 10-point game, but really it was a touchdown with 5 seconds remaining that gave Joe Flacco his second of the game and even kept it to under 2 touchdowns. But they were a 4.5-point home underdog against Buffalo. Didn't really come close to covering that number. And we know Flacco will have some good with some bad, as we saw in Cleveland. But he has 4 interceptions to just 2 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. That's not necessarily your recipe for success as a playoff team either.
Yeah. Maybe they look at the schedule, Ben, and say, okay, it's the Jets. We got a winnable game. So let's give this one more crack at this thing. We win, we go to 5-6. But again, like I said earlier, even if they made the playoffs, you're not winning in the postseason. Not with Pittsburgh and Baltimore and Kansas City and Buffalo in front of you. Please, you got to be realistic about it. So, but maybe they think, okay, one last crack at this thing, and if it doesn't work this week, then we bring in Richardson and let him learn his lumps. If you have that overall theme of, okay, we consider ourselves a winning team, but maybe you got to scale back a little bit. Maybe trade Pittman. Maybe trade to Jonathan Taylor. What could you have gotten for those guys at the trade deadline? I would think at least a first-round pick for Pittman anyway, wide receiver. Maybe not, but you can't allow everyone else to make your thinking with your quarterback. If you're going to draft a quarterback that, as you pointed out, you knew is going to have lumps. You knew there was going to be at least 1 year where you're just going to have to say, you know what, we're going to learn and see what the guy can do. So. But we'll see you after this week. If they lose this week, then I'd really be surprised.
Yeah, and that would send a weird message, I think, to the locker room. It's like, hey, our season's over, right? We said Flacco was the guy to lead us to the postseason. We're not doing that. Let's let the young kid learn. Everybody else like, well, then what are we doing? Again, it's kind of a bad recipe for Indianapolis and is not great for the overall career trajectory of Anthony Richardson. Quickly, Scott, and I'm sure you'll hit on it on the other side of the break. I got to head out. They're using the studio for a couple of interviews. Once again, the New York Giants lost in Munich to the Carolina Panthers in overtime. Daniel Jones hasn't been awful this year. He just hasn't been very good, which is pretty much Daniel Jones summed up. Mediocre. The Giants on the bye week during week 11, but Scott Brian Daboll meeting with reporters yesterday, non-committal about who the starting quarterback would be moving forward, just saying they are, quote, evaluating everything. I'm sure you'll have more on the other side of the break, but interesting times for the New York Giants. That is no doubt. Scott Wetzel takes you home here on this Tuesday on Football Full Circle. On the other side of the break, he will have plenty more from around this week in the National Football League, and of course setting the stage for the weeks to come. Scott, I'll talk to you, man. Have a great rest of the week and rest of the show. Back on FFC next.
The boys of summer become the champions of fall.
The World Series is on its way.
And SportsGrid brings you every angle. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and Sirius XM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Money Line at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Hey, welcome back. It is Football Full Circle on this Tuesday afternoon. Yeah, talking a little bit about the Giants situation there before Ben left us. So it is, I'm a little surprised that they would say something like they said yesterday about how they're undecided on who the quarterback situation would be. They have a serviceable, the Giant backup, and Drew Lock. Nothing great, but it's not a rookie. Guy's been in the league a number of years. You know what you have with Drew Lock. I don't think he's challenging anymore for any starting jobs. So I don't know what the point would be. Now, Danny Nichols, as we like to call him, does have a clause in his contract, as a lot of these guys do. It's an injury clause. If he gets hurt, then $23 million of his $40+ million salary for next year becomes guaranteed. So that's why the Giants wouldn't play him anymore, because they don't want him to get hurt and then have to pay him $23 million next season. However, a couple things here. One, you got a head coach who's clearly fighting for his job. You may have the same thing with a general manager. I think Shane's probably safer, but Daboll, I would not make that the case for Brian Daboll, the head coach of the Giants. So he's got to worry about winning some games. Otherwise, he's going to get whacked versus, okay, I'm more concerned about, having to pay Danny Nichols next season. So that's strike number one. Two, has it been his fault? I suppose. He's awful, but we all knew that. Except for the Giant administration, we all knew that Danny Nichols was awful. So I don't know. All of a sudden, the epiphany lit up into the Giants' head coach's faces and said, "Okay, you know what? He's not any good, so let's bench him." I just be surprised. There's so much left in the season. If there's 3, 4, 5 weeks maybe left in the season, okay. But you got 7 games left. To think that you're going to sit your starting quarterback because you're afraid he's going to get hurt for next year. And it's only $23 million. And I say that like it's, chump change. But, $23 million compared to $40 million. And if you're going to, go in a different direction with Danny Nichols, that means you're going to bring in a rookie quarterback who's not going to make anything. So you could survive having to pay, Danny Nichols $23 million next year if, God forbid, he should get hurt. So, I don't think that really should play a role in this thing. But, when you have 2 wins and you've lost as many games as they have and you played as poorly as they have, losing to Carolina over in Germany, man, that was just bad. Watching that football game Sunday morning, wow. I don't know what this guy did 2 years ago when, he led the Giants to the postseason and actually won a football game in Minnesota, remember, a playoff game on the road. Got him to the second round, then they got whacked by Philadelphia. But Daniel Jones has not been seen. Wasn't seen up until that year and has not been seen since that season. So I don't think if they do bench him, I don't think it's one of those where, okay, we're benching him for the rest of the season. I think it's just, we got Drew Lock. He's halfway decent, so we're going to play him a game or two, let him have an opportunity to try and turn things around here for the Giants. But I don't think we've seen the last of Daniel Jones. Not to mention, you could still have him on your team. His guaranteed salary is over after this year, pending the injury. So they more than likely will cut him loose. But, you could still survive paying him if you wanted to, even as a backup next season. But who wants to pay a backup $40 million? These guys, I'm surprised these teams really agree to those clauses. It makes sense. I'm playing for you this year. I got hurt. I can't play next year. I mean, it would take a serious injury, right, for him not to be able to play next year. But we've seen them happen. But I don't think the Giants are going to go that route. I really don't. I am curious about this Washington-Philadelphia game Thursday night. But when they've set that schedule up, did they think this was going to be for first place in the NFC East? Probably not, right? They figured, all right, we'll throw a division game. They like to have division games in these Thursday games just to make it even square for every team. But they got a great game. Jaden Daniels, his numbers have come down a little bit. He doesn't throw. The perception for him is he throws for 250, 300 yards every single game. That's really not the case. So he throws for about 200, 210, 220 tops. So can he go toe-to-toe with Jalen Hurts? Kind of a moment of truth here. You've already lost one. You don't want to have this, a little losing streak turned into something like 3 or 4 losses for Washington. So big game for them. They played well on the road this year. You're getting a field goal plus. I would be, and the road teams, believe it or not, on Thursdays have a 500 record, 50-50. You would think that would definitely not be the case, right? You would think the home team on Thursdays would have the clear advantage with the short week, but that's not the case. And the road team has a much better against the spread mark. So I would still take Washington plus the 3.5 over Philadelphia, even though I said from the beginning of the season I'm not jumping off the bandwagon that's the best team in the NFC East, as it clearly is. So good job by Ben. Good job by Danny. We'll be back here tomorrow doing it all again. Football full circle right here on the Grid.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.